So we know that languages always change, right? And no one can stop languages from changing, right? And we study, for example, some assumptions about, let me switch to the PowerPoint for a second here. So we study some basic assumptions in historical linguistics, right? And things like changes are natural, right? Nobody can stop languages from changing and that kind of stuff. And what is important and I want to focus on today is this assumption. Language change takes place primarily via the diffusion of variants, okay? So I'll focus on that today, okay? Language change takes place primarily via the diffusion of variants. So variants are different ways of saying the same thing, okay? Different ways of saying the same thing. For example, different ways of pronouncing the same word, right? And we know that a word could be pronounced so many ways because we have allophones and allomorphs and so on, right? So I'll switch back to this. So I'll focus on that, language change and diffusion, okay? So again, language change takes place because of the diffusion and because of innovation, okay? So innovation here means that somebody must introduce a new form, or somebody must introduce a change or a variant, right? Variant is the same way of, different ways of saying the same thing, right? So someone or some group of people, could be one person or could be a group of people, introduces a change or a variant, right? And that change might be introduced because at first it might be an error. Maybe somebody mispronounces a word, for example, right? But it could be that someone just intends to change the language that way. So it could be an error, could be an intentional thing, okay? But that variant could be adopted, okay, by other speakers in the community, right? Because they may think, oh, that's a cool way of saying it, or they may think that that's an innovative form. They are early adopters like that, right? So that variant may be adopted, and that change will diffuse. Diffuse is to spread, right? That change, when adopted, will diffuse further, right? And you have a new way of saying the same thing. So that's how language changes. Or that change might die off because other people might not think that, oh, it's a cool way of saying that, right? It might die off. But whatever changes that happen is because of the innovation and because of the diffusion, okay? And I have some examples. We looked at some examples in English last time, and now I have more examples, okay? So when you study English grammar, right, before, the order system of English grammar, let's see, the order system, when you want to, you know that there are two kinds of nouns, right? The mass noun and the, the count noun, right? Countable and uncountable nouns, right? So we have mass noun. So mass nouns are uncountable, right? And then countable, right? When you want to compare, the amount, okay? For mass nouns, you can say things like less, right? You have to say things like less bread, right? Less air, like that, right? When you say, because it's uncountable, so we are told that we should use the determiner less, okay? But for countable nouns, you cannot use less, right? You have to use, if you want to indicate that there's like a lower amount of that, you have to say few, right? Like fewer people, for example, people, or fewer loaf of bread, for example, right? So this is countable, right? So you have to use fewer instead of less, right? That's the old system. Now, the new or newer system, relatively new, is that most English-speaking people would use less here, less bread, less air, for example. And for countable nouns also, like less calories, countable nouns, right? Or less loaves of bread, like that. So we call that, these are the new variants, right? So this is the new system. So these are the new variants, right? And they are innovative forms, right? Because they are more recent than these two forms. And then people start adopting, right? A lot of people start adopting less as the determiner for countable nouns, okay? So that's why nowadays you will see everywhere let's say if you go to a supermarket, they will advertise a product as having less calories than other products, right? Instead of saying fewer calories like that, okay? So this is what we call the diffusion and innovation of new variants. So it's new variant because it's a different way of saying the same thing, right? This is just a grammatical way, right? And it makes sense too, because if you compare it the other way, you could use more with more bread, more air, or more people. So the fact that more could be used with both mass nouns and countable nouns would kind of persuade people unconsciously to use less for everything, for both mass nouns and also countable nouns as well, right? So people tend to be more regular in their use of language, and language tends to change in that direction, to be more regular and to be kind of easier, okay? Or other things that have to do with pronunciation, like the example of the word E-I-T-H-E-R, right? It could be pronounced two ways, either or either, right? So these are two variants of the same thing, okay? Two ways of saying the same thing, okay? So this is an example of how a language change, a particular change can take place, okay? Now I move on to some history of historical linguistics, okay? So historical linguistics started around the 18th century in 1788. That's when people usually credited Sir William Jones as the father of historical linguistics, okay? So Sir William Jones studied so many different languages, and he noticed that Sanskrit is just a language of ancient India, okay? So he noticed that Sanskrit shared many similarities with Greek and Latin, okay? In other words, he noticed the similar ways words in Sanskrit and Latin can look, okay? And these words, which look similar, okay, similar enough in Sanskrit and in Greek and in Latin, we call them cognates, okay? Cognates are words that are from the same origin, okay? So cognates are words from the same origin, but they may look a little bit different, okay? And they have the same origin, right, from the original language. And so because they look alike and they mean the same thing in different languages, right, Sir William Jones suggested that they shared a common ancestor, okay? They share a common father language or mother language like that, or grandmother language like that, okay? So he started comparing cognates, okay? Cognates are words of the same origin from different languages, right? And with the same meaning too. And by comparing cognates, he said it's possible to reconstruct the proto-language, okay? The proto-language is like the great-great-great-grandmother language, like that, okay? Don't forget that we don't have, right, the writing system of the oldest language of the world, because the writing system only originated maybe 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, okay? So in order to get to know the real, like, great-great-great-grandmother language, we have to reconstruct by ourselves, okay? By comparing cognates, and we can get to the oldest language possible. Even though we don't have evidence, we use our educated guess in order to reconstruct, to do the reconstruction, okay? So the more similar cognates look, the closer the relationship between those languages, of course, right? So that's just common sense, right? And by comparing cognates, we know how languages may be related to, okay? Because if they look alike, then it must mean that they have a close relationship with each other, okay? And we can put languages in different families, okay? That's the idea. So this is just an example. For the word month, okay? For the word that has the meaning of month, okay? You can see in your left-hand column here that every word here which has the meaning of month, okay, starts with an M. You see that, right? Every word here starts with an M. So they look more or less alike. And some languages are more like each other than others, okay? Like English and Dutch, for example, you see that there's an N here, right? Somewhere in the middle of the word. And so does German, right? German has an N too in there, okay? And Swedish too. So maybe English, Dutch, German, and Swedish are closely related to each other, okay? In addition to the fact that all of the words here start with an M, okay? So other words, other languages like French, Spanish, Portuguese, or Italian here, they all share the S ending as well, you see? So this might mean that French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian are more closely related to each other than they are to English, Dutch, German, and Swedish, because in English, Dutch, German, and Swedish, we don't see the S, right, like that, okay? So we can, by comparing similarities and differences like this, we can put languages into different families, okay? And then the languages on the right-hand side are so not related to these languages at all. For example, like in Arabic, it starts with SH, for example. It doesn't have any similarity, right, with English. Or in Finnish, or in Basque, or Basque is a language in southern Spain or northern Spain. Turkish here, Malay, Zulu, and so on, right? They don't look exactly, they look like so different from the languages on your left-hand side, like that, okay? Or if you look at another example, the words that mean night in different languages, okay? The words that mean night in different languages. We have English, French, German, Scots, and so on your left-hand side, and then on your right-hand side we have from other languages. But in all of these languages, as you can see, they all start out with an N, right? N here, N here, N here, and on your right-hand side also, right? So this means that they should be related, okay? So by keeping doing this, right, comparing cognates from different languages, we can put languages into families, okay? And this one maybe is not clear on your handout, but or on the slide that you print off. But you can see here that this is like the language families of the world. So there is color-coded. So here, this is Africa, right? You see that it's kind of yellow tone here, okay? So it means that languages in Africa here are related, okay? And it's in a different color than you see here or here, right? So it means that the languages here are so far or not related to other groups, okay? Like here is English, right? The green thing, English too here, English here too, and so on, okay? And so you see green around here too. So that's maybe one family, okay? And we call it the Germanic family. We'll talk about this a little bit more. And then you see kind of pink here in South America. This is South America, okay? And Central America is here. And you see pink here also, okay? That's Spanish and Italian and French and that kind of thing, okay? So, but unfortunately Korea is around here, right? You can see that Korea here is not related to other languages, right? So Korea is one language without any relationship. I don't know how, but it stands out as an isolate language, okay? Isolate language which doesn't kind of relate to other languages. But what we'll focus on is the family that is called Indo-European, okay, because English is in that family. I'll talk about this in a minute. But before we look at the family of English, there are some basic assumptions of language families or family trees. And languages are related because they have a common ancestor, meaning that they used to look the same, they used to sound the same, right? In the great-great-great-great-grandmother language like that. But something happened, right? A lot of things happened to the great-great-great-great-great-grandmother language and then causing it to change, to split off into different languages like that. And this is like the concept of a family tree, right? So when someone marries another person, you have children languages and so on, right? And depending on what happens or who you marry, the children might look different, right? However, in historical linguistics, only the maternal terms are used, okay? We'll refer to the ancestor language as mother or grandmother, and the new language as the daughter or sister, like that. I don't know why people don't use the paternal terms like father language or, you know, son language, but the way that they talk about languages or language relations is only maternal, okay? Big family is big, right? Because you see so many languages under here. This family is called the Indo-European family, okay? This is different from the African family that we talked about earlier, right? Languages that are spoken in South Africa, for example, okay? But these Indo-European languages, spread so far and so far across the globe. That's why it has the name Indo-European, okay? Indo is as far as South India, right? India. And European is Europe, right? But here it doesn't mean that all European languages are in this family, no, okay? Only maybe a majority of those languages are in this family, okay? So here is spread as far as, this family spreads as far as India, right? And you have Indian languages here in one branch, like Hindu, Bengali, and other modern Indian languages, okay? In one, kind of one branch here, okay? And you have other languages like Iranian, like Persian. Persian is spoken in Iran, right? And you have Balto-Slavic, right, in Eastern European, right, area, like Lithuanian, Lettish, Russian, Polish, Czech, Bulgarian, Serbo-Croatian in Eastern Europe, okay? So there is one branch for that. And then you have the Celtic branch here, you see, spoken in Ireland and some areas in England, right? Irish, right? In Ireland, Welsh in Wales, and then Gaelic and Breton by Scottish people, for example. Okay, so also in the Indo-European family. And also you have this branch, Hellenic branch, which is modern Greek, okay? And this branch is also very important, Italic branch, meaning with languages with origin in Italy, right? Including Latin, right? And other related languages such as French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Catalan, Romanian, okay? So these are all under the Italic branch, okay? Because they are based on Latin, and Latin came from Italy, okay? And you see the time frame here on your right-hand side. One major branch that I haven't mentioned is the Germanic branch here, right? Germanic is German, related to German, okay? So it splits off into Germanic, North Germanic here, the Germanic languages that are spoken in the north, okay, north of Germany, for example. East Germanic and West Germanic spoken in the west side of Germany. So West Germanic, of course, includes English, right? The British Isle is to the left, to the west of Germany, like that. So you have Swedish, Danish, and what is that? Gothic here, right? So in the northern branch, and then you have Norwegian, Icelandic, and Faroese here, and then you have Gothic here, German here, and so on. So let's see. So where's English? English is here, okay? In the West Germanic branch, okay? So English, if you look at this family tree, English is related to here, Dutch, okay? So English and Dutch, we can call them sisters, right? We use the maternal terms. So English is a sister of Dutch. So you'll find a lot of similarities between English and Dutch, okay? People who speak Dutch will have less difficulties, okay, speaking English and vice versa. And English is related to German as well, cousin-like, okay? And English is also related to Swedish, but not in the same kind of subfamily as Dutch, okay? So this is how these languages are related, okay? But there are some weaknesses to this kind of representation, because when you look at this family tree, it might strike you as, you know, one language just split off, right? One language just split off from other languages suddenly, right? Like here, how could Indo-European split off into Indian, Armenian, Iranian, and Germanic, and so on? It doesn't give you the details of what causes the change, what causes the split into different languages, okay? And this kind of family tree representation doesn't give you the details of how it's possible that there are a lot of Latin words in English. There's no relationship, right, in terms of the indirect relationship between Latin and English here, right? But we know that in English there are lots of Latin words. So how do we get those Latin words into English? This kind of family tree representation doesn't tell you that, okay? Even though there are some other influences like political influences or historical influences that might cause Latin words to be adopted into English, but this family tree doesn't tell you that, okay? So it's the same thing here that you see. So English is in the Indo-European family, and is in the Germanic branch, and more specifically is in the West Germanic branch, in the same branch in the same sub-branch as Dutch, okay? And some problems with the family tree model. So the family tree, as we talked about it before, it implies that each language is separate, right? Because you don't see the other kinds of influence, which may be historical or cultural, which have caused some word to be adopted. And the family tree suggests new languages appear or branch off suddenly, right? And it doesn't talk about mixed languages. For example, how Korean may be related to English, right? Korean English, for example. Okay. Let's see here. What I would like to do now is, before we start the history of English, we'll focus on the comparative method, okay? The comparative method is, again, you have to compare the cognates, right, from different languages. And what you do is you think about what might be the oldest form, okay? What might be the oldest form? And we call that the proto-language, okay? I'll write this out here. It's on the slide here. You see the proto, the word proto, right? The word proto here means it's the unattested language, okay? It's the great-great-great-great-great-grandmother language, like that, okay? The word that I use here is unattested, right? Unattested language. Unattested meaning you don't have any evidence for it. Unattested, it means you don't have any evidence for it. Remember, I said that the writing system only was invented perhaps 1,500 years ago. So when you go back to the great-great-great-great-grandmother language this far back in time, right? Before Christ even, right? 3,500 years before Christ, okay? When you go back this far, you cannot find any evidence that that language existed even, okay? You don't have the writing system, and you don't know the people who spoke that language, okay? So we call it the, where's the word proto? We call it the proto. We call it the proto language, or proto, in this case, Proto-Indo-European, right? So the word proto here means that we don't have any evidence for it. It's unattested, but we think that it existed, okay? And we only know about the proto-language because we reconstruct it, right? We reconstruct it by ourselves. We use the comparative method to do that. So we'll look at some examples of the reconstructive method. So if you would turn to the second page on that handout, okay? You see here the reconstructed example. So this is what I'm going to show today. Let's suppose that on this chart, okay, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 languages that you think are related, okay? 4 languages that you know are related because they look almost alike. The cognates look almost alike. So for example, the first word is hono. The first set is hono in language A, hono in language B. Same, right? Exactly the same. In language C, however, is phono, is F rather than an H, for example. In language D is vono, is V instead of F or H, okay? But they have the same meaning. These cognates have the same meaning. They look alike. And in some cases, like language A and language B, they are exactly the same word. So they are related. So that's first set. The second set, you have hari, and then, oh, what is that? Hari, fari, and veli, right? Rahima, rahima, rafima, levima, like that. And then hor, for, vol, like that. So by looking at these different cognates, we have 4, right? Four sets or so. You can probably tell that language A is more close, right, to language B than it is to C or D. Like you can probably tell because language A, hono here, looks exactly like language B, hono. And then hari, rahima, rahima, exactly the same. And last one, hor, exactly the same. So language B and language A are so related, so closely related, right? Than they are to language C or D. But what we'll do is we'll try to reconstruct the proto-language, the parent language, the mother language of language A, B, C, and D, okay? So we want to list out. So the first step is to find the corresponding sets. Okay, so the corresponding sets here are like H here, the front position is H in language A, in language B is H, in language C it's F, in language B is V, okay? So we write it out here like that, okay? H, H, F, V, so that's one corresponding set, okay? And then we do the same for the vowels, okay? O, 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 so you see that. Another corresponding set. And the last one, N, 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 same. So we have the third set. And you might ask me, what about the last vowel, right? Don't we do the last vowel? Well, we already did. O, 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 right? So we already did. So we do the same for other words here, right? We do the consonant, we do the vowels like this. And we list out the corresponding set in this last column. Okay, and you will see the results like this. Okay, so that's the second step. Okay, I'm sorry, that's the first step. Find the corresponding sets. Okay, and then the third step to reconstruct the parent language, the mother language of all these languages. Okay, is to look at the corresponding sets that you get here and think, try to form a guess, educated guess as to what the parent language might sound like. If you look at this one, HHFV, okay, we'll go by either the majority rules or the linguistic common sense. Okay, so the majority rule says that if you have more evidence of one particular sound, okay, if you have more evidence, then that sound is likely to be the mother sound. Okay. So here, H, H, F, and V. We have 2 H's, we have 1 F, and we have 1 V. If we go by the majority sound, we'll have to choose H as the proto sound, okay, as the mother sound in the proto language. So we'll choose H like that, okay? Or here, in the case of O, 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 the majority rule is evident here, right? That the mother language must have the O as the vowel sound like that. Or in this case of the vowel, A, right? This is the letter E, right? Pronounced A. So in this case, if we use the majority rule, the proto sound would be A, right? Like this, majority rule, okay? And another rule is the common sense rule, okay? So if you have F and V, okay, if you have F and V, for example, which one is more likely to change, okay, according to the linguistic principles or phonological principles that we have studied? Is F more likely to change to a V or the other way around, okay? When F is, you remember that example on our quiz? When F is when a sound, a voiceless sound is flanked by two voice sounds, right? It can become voice because of assimilation, remember? So we would, from our linguistic common sense, we would posit, we would guess that F can change to V. F is more likely to change to V when it's flanked by a voice sound or something like that, okay? So we would say that in perhaps in the original language, it used to be an F, and then it's changed to V in that particular language, D, because of some environment. Okay? And there are more details than this, but this is what I want to show you as to how historical linguists do this kind of construction. So they just have to compare cognates and come out with some correspondence sets like this, and then think about what might be the parent form, the proto-form for each sound, H or F or V. And there are two rules that they can go by, the majority rule or the linguistic common sense rule, okay? And sometimes these two rules, the majority rules or the linguistic common sense, can be in conflict, and there are ways to solve that problem, but we won't go into that today, okay? Or in this class, because it's the introduction class. Okay. So any questions? Okay, before we start the history of English today, on the first page is what I promised to give you from last time. So for those of you who would like to do this extra credit option with me, you could memorize. This is the Lord's Prayer, and I will use this as a transition into our history of English here. So this is the Lord's Prayer in Old English, and you have the modern English translation at the bottom, okay? Line by line translation. And so for those of you who want to pick this as an option, so you can memorize from line 1 to line 10, and then come to recite the poem, the Lord's Prayer with me in person. Recite meaning you cannot look at the script, okay? So this can be any time until we have the final exam, which is on the 10th that we talked about, right? So the way to pronounce this is just pretend that you are reading the IPA symbols, okay? Pretend that you are reading the IPA symbols. I think I already talked about some hard ones. So this one that looks like a P, but it's not a P, it's a TH sound or this sound, okay, in Old English. So you just pronounce it like a TH when you see the letter that looks like a P. And we call this letter, the name of it is a thorn, okay, a thorn. So the thorn, I call it a thorn. The thorn is pronounced as TH, okay? In interdental fricative sound, okay? So this is fader, right? This is air, as in the IPA symbol. Fader ure, right? Fader ure, and then TH thu the er on heavenum, like that, okay? And then C, this is a thorn again. So C thin, right? C thin. Nama is name, right? Yehalgod, right? Yehalgod. To To, not to, right? Because O is O, not U. It's not like modern English. To is to, not like that, right? To bekume, right? This C is a K. To bekume, right? And then this is TH, right? You remember it's a thorn. Thin riche. This C is, that's a problematic sound. This C is a T hook sound, okay? How do you know which C is a K and which C is a T hook? Well, if it's a T hook, it must be in front of a front vowel. A is a front vowel, so it's a T hook, okay? If it's in front of a back vowel, in this case, U, it's always a K, okay? So that's easy to recognize. K is a back sound. Remember, it's a velar sound, so it's before a back vowel, like that. TH, T hook here, is before a front sound because of the result of palatalization, okay? So K becomes a T hook in front of a front vowel, like that. So this is your basic phonetic and phonological background, okay? So when you see a back vowel, a C is pronounced as a K because K is a back sound. When you see a front vowel, A or E, the letter I, is T hook, okay? So in this case, to bekume tin riche, right? Yewur, this is TH, right? Yewurte, right? Yewurte, the cross D is also TH. Tin villa, right? Your will, right? Tin villa, will, villa is will. Tin villa, on earthen, right? On earthen, swa swa on heavenum, right? Earthen is earth, swa swa is as or so, on heaven or in heaven, like that, okay? And then what else? Urne, your, right? Yadek kwam likan. Halaf is loaf of bread, right? Sileus today, give us today, right? And forgive us ure guiltas, forgive our guilt or our sin, right? Please forgive our guilt or our sin. Swa swa, so or as, we forgive us as we forgive. Urum is our, guiltendum, people who cause sin to us, cause guilt to us, like that. So just forgive us just like we forgive people who do guilty things to us, like that. And is and, right? Is modern and. And yelatu, us on cause nunge, right? On cause nunge. Ak alis us of evile. So triche, right? CE is T hook, right? Because it's in front of a front sound, A. So triche, right? So triche. So this is a T hook. So triche, like that, okay? Truly or amen, like that. If evile is evil, right? You can recognize that. Us is us, right? Of is out of or from, like that, okay? So is people in the past, people who took this course last year or the year before, many of them, maybe more than 50% could do this successfully. So I believe that you could too. So you have your time, so you can take your time and memorize all these 10 lines and come to recite with me in person, okay? If you are not sure about how to pronounce any of these words here, just come and ask me, okay? So you saw some example of Old English, which is the Lord's Prayer in Old English. So now it's a good way to transition into the history of English, okay? When you study the history of English, we usually divide the historical periods of English into maybe 3 or 4 different time spans, okay? But what I want to say and what I want to emphasize is that these time spans are rough time span, okay? And the dates here, like 5th century, 11th century, they are historical, right? They are historical dates, meaning that some historical event took place on those days, okay? And these days are historical, not linguistic. So it's not like, oh, in the 12th century, the first day of January, we have a different stage of English, okay? It's not like that. It's just the way that we conveniently, for our convenience, talk about English in different periods. But for people who spoke like these different stages of English, in those times, they're not gonna know, oh, now we are in the Middle English period like that, right? And the middle is, I mean, if you look at the middle, the word middle, middle is not middle because it's not in the middle, because in the present day is, you know, expanding, right? 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18 and so on, middle is not really in the middle. So we just use these terms for convenience, not any linguistic, there's no any, you know, linguistic reason behind these terms, okay? But for our convenience, we'll talk about Old English, Middle English, Early Modern English, and also present day English, okay? In these different 4 periods. And Old English usually started from the 5th century to the 11th century, and Middle English 11th to 14th, and Early Modern English from 14th to 18th, and then present day English from 18th to now. Okay, so we'll talk about English in these periods. We look at the Old English sample here, and then Middle English would look somewhat like Old English, ure fari, that art in heavens. So similar, right? Similar, at least more similar to each other than Old English and Modern English here. Okay, so you can see on this slide how the first two lines of Lord's Praise in English have changed through time. Okay. Now a bit of the history of Old English from 449 to 1066. Okay, these are historical dates again, and this is the 5th century, and this is the 11th century. Okay, so England nowadays, what we call England is a big island. Okay, so on that big island was occupied what we call Celtic people, or we call them the Celts, okay? The Celts or Celtic people. They had been there for who knows how long, okay? For thousands and thousands of years. So they are the native people there, okay? Long before the birth of the English language that we are speaking today, okay? So the Celts or the Celtic people, they spoke what we call Celtic languages, right? Remember in our Indo-European here, Celtic is one branch here, which is a different branch from English altogether, okay? But even though it's under the Indo-European family. So the Celtic people, they spoke Celtic languages like Irish, Scottish, like Welsh, like that, or Gaelic, like that. Okay, so those languages are not English. Okay, and then around the 5th century, right? Around the 1st century, the Romans invaded the Isles here, the British Isles. Okay, and took control for about 400 years. So this is where some Latin words came into English, because of the occupation of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was so powerful that it, I think, went as far as here, England, and also perhaps to the Middle East as well. So here you have some Latin words coming into English because of the Roman occupation here for about 400 years. That's a long time. Okay, so you have Celtic languages to start with, right? That's the first language. First language group that will have influence on the English language. The second language is the Latin here that the Roman people brought with them and then stay there for about 400 years. And then when the Roman Empire was about to collapse, okay, well, the greatest power will collapse some days, right? So in about the 5th century here, the 5th century of about 450 AD or so, when the Roman in Rome, right, the Roman Empire in Rome was about to collapse, they had to call back all the people, all the soldiers that are in different regions throughout Europe, right, to go back to Rome because that's the capital. So to protect Rome, right? So they left England, right, because of the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century. Now there is a power vacuum, right? Power vacuum on the British Isles because the Romans are not there anymore. So the island was kind of empty, right, of powerful people. There are Celtic people, yes, but they're not as sophisticated in terms of technology as the Roman people. So when the Roman people left and went back to Rome, there is a power vacuum there on the island. Now, with that power vacuum, we have 3 groups of people, and we call them Germanic people from Germany or the areas around Germany. The Angles, the Jutes, and the Saxons, okay? Sail across the channel, sail across the ocean to the British Isle, okay? So we have 3 groups, Angles, Jutes, and Saxons, sailed across the ocean to the British Isle. And this is a map of all these people. You have that on your handout that I gave out today. In the first picture here, okay? The 5th century migration of the Angles, Jutes, and Saxons. And we call them the Germanic people. This is because they are from the area around Germany, right? Maybe north or south or west or east of Germany here. This is modern Germany, right? And so the Anglo, the Saxon, and the Jutes here. So they sail across the ocean. And they landed on different parts of England. So this is the British Isle here. So we have 3 groups of Germanic people, okay? And you can probably guess that these 3 groups may be related linguistically because they spoke Germanic languages, right? They spoke Germanic languages, so they should be able to understand each other. And they sail across the ocean here and then land on different parts of England, okay? And the name of the British Isle before, right? It's Britannia, okay? And that's from Latin, okay? The name English, English language, English people, and so on, is from one of the groups here, Anglo, okay? So Anglo, and then somehow the vowel changes to England and English from Anglo, okay? So a or a changes to a ing, for example, okay? So it's Anglaland, actually. It's Anglaland, the land of the Angles, like that. And then it changes phonologically or phonetically to England, the land of Angles still, right? So the name before the arrival of the Germanic tribes here, the Germanic people, the name before was Britannia. That's what we get the word British, Britain, and so on, right? And that's from Latin, okay? But after the Germanic people arrived, then the island was referred to as the land of the Angles, or Anglerland, and so it's England nowadays. Okay? I don't know why it's not the land of the Jutes, or it's not the land of the Saxons, but probably because the Angles were powerful at that time, more powerful than the Jutes and the Saxons, like that. Okay? So that's the first migration, okay, of people from somewhere else. Maybe second migration, because the first group was the Roman people, right? Now you have the third group of language that would influence English, right? Which is the Germanic languages that these people would bring with them, right? And this is the start of what we call English language nowadays. Because before that we have Celtic and we have Latin. And these two families are not English, right? And what we have nowadays is just the languages that the Jutes, the Angles, and the Saxons spoke those days. So that's why people mark off the beginning of Old English, because it's really English, right? As the 5th century, and the 5th century was when these guys came to England, like that. Okay? So that's what happened as the first, maybe the first historical event that would lead to English, what we have nowadays. Okay? Now, these different groups of people would, rule over England, and there are several kingdoms in England. Okay, meaning separate kingdoms in England. Okay, not just a unified kingdom. So different, maybe 7 kingdoms or so throughout maybe 400 or 500 years later after the 5th century. Okay, and the power of each group might overpower another group, and they just take turns becoming the group who hold power. Okay, like sometimes the Anglo or the Saxon will have more power than other groups, and so on, because there are different kingdoms. Okay, just like in the Korean Peninsula, there are several kingdoms, and so on, right? And so that's the 5th century, and they take turns ruling England for about 300 or 400 years. And then we have in the 8th century also, okay, we have people from the north. We have people from the north. We call them the Vikings, okay? The Vikings. Or Norsemen. Men from the north, Norsemen, including Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and so on, okay? Like Scandinavian people from Scandinavia, right? You know, when you watch the film Thor, for example, it's from that area, okay, Scandinavia. So the Norsemen, again, just like the Anglo, the Jutes, and the Saxons, they sail across the ocean here. So they are from around here, north, okay, the north. So they sail across the ocean here and try to take control of the British Isle, okay, because they want somewhere that, you know, they could live happily forever, just like the Saxon or Angles and the Jutes and so on. So they came to the island, sailing across the ocean, and they fought with the Germanic people, okay? And the Germanic people, especially the king of the Saxon people, Alfred that time, he foresaw, right, that he couldn't defend all the island himself, okay? So he made a pact. He made a pact with the Danish people or the Norsemen that, okay, you can rule half of the island, and then the other half would be my rule, okay, my control. So he made a kind of treaty with the Danish people, or the Norsemen, or the Viking people, depending on what you want to call them. So half of the British Isle was given to the Norsemen, okay? And we call these what we call the Danelaw area, okay? You see the Danelaw area is like half of the island. This whole thing is the British Isle, right? So half was given to be under the rule of the Viking, okay? We call it the Danelaw because that area is under the law of the Danish people, under the law of the Danish people, so it's the Danelaw area. And then the rest is the English area, okay? Like here you see, and Kingdom of West Saxon, right? And then this is the Wales, right? Wales is where Celtic people live. And this is like Scotland, where Celtic people live, okay? I forgot to tell you, if we could back up, I forgot to tell you that when the Germanic people came in the 5th century, they drove away, they kicked off the Celtic people, right, to the west area, the westernmost area, and to the northern area of the British Isle, so that you have Scotland here and you have Wales here. So these are like heavily populated by Celtic people, because the Anglo-Saxon people, the Germanic people didn't like the Celtic people like that, okay? And that's why maybe today's Welsh people and Scottish people don't like British people or English people either, okay? So you can see the different like power groups here, right? We have the Danelaw area, we have the truly English area, and we have the Celtic people area here, okay? And in this area, the Danelaw area, we have a lot of place names that are really Scandinavian, not English or not Celtic, okay? So that's what happened in the 8th century. So we have the attack of the Vikings, okay? And again, we have some Scandinavian words coming into English, okay? Words like skirt, okay? SK is a Scandinavian word, okay? It has the same root as shirt. Skirt is the palatalization of the hook here, okay? But when we get that word, skirt, from Scandinavian, we just use it for a different type of garment, right? Skirt is different from shirt, even though both words share the same origin and should mean the same. So that's the 8th century, okay? Now, it has been like that for about maybe 200 years or so, until this is the last one that we'll talk about today, until this event, this historical event in 1066, which is the 11th century. You know that there's the Danelaw area and the truly English area, right? And for some reasons that I won't, for some historical reasons that I won't go into today, there is a king of France here, a king of, not France, I'm sorry, king of Normandy, right? Normandy is in the northeast of France. There's Paris. Paris is another kingdom, okay? So this is Normandy, is another kingdom in France, okay? Today is part of France, right? So Normandy here, this is the English Channel, which is like maybe 2 hours by ship, like that. So the Duke of Normandy here wants to come and claim the throne of England, okay? Claim the throne of England here. So what he did was to send troops to England, right? Here, just sailing across the channel, which is like 2 hours, very close. And then there's a battle here at what we call Hastings, okay? So it's called Battle of Hastings. And what happened was he won. he won that war, killing the king there. Okay, so he, Duke of Normandy, or the King of Normandy here, became the King of England in 1066 as a result of the Battle of Hastings. Okay, and then this is the event that would mark the end of the Old English period, because when the King of Normandy came to take control of England, he was French, he spoke French, he brought other people, other noble people who are French as well. And then when they came to rule over England, it means that English would not be spoken. So you would have French, you would use French for everything, right? When you go to church, for example, when you write laws for people, when you conduct business with people, everything was done in French for about 300 or 400 years. And that's why we have a lot of French words or Latin words. French is from Latin too, right? So, so that would mark off the end of the Old English period, and that would mark the beginning of the Middle English period as well, because of this Battle of Hastings. Okay, we'll come back on Wednesday and talk about the Middle English period and also the early modern period, and we look at linguistic changes. Okay. And this is the Battle of Hastings, right? They sail across the channel, and then the French people defeated the British king.